Okay, I think we can start now.
Yes, Shalini, you can begin the
Hello
session now.
everyone, I'm Shalini and I welcome you all to this another webinar organized by Red Lanka Analytica. So, RLA, as we all know, it's a Delhi-based organization. We are International Affairs Observer Group and we research upon critical issues related to international importance and a special focus on China and South Asia. We try to review our statements, but we are determined to expose China's vicious agendas and we stand for truth. So I once again welcome you all to this webinar entitled Chinese Hand Behind Sri Lanka's Economic Crisis. Um, Today we have three esteemed expert speakers who have joined us and they are gonna put forward. Let's start with Ashok sir. He is a Kargil War veteran and defense analyst. He is a visiting fellow of CLAWS and he specializes on neighboring countries with a special focus on China. He is an accomplished strategist, administrator, and a charismatic leader with more than 37 years in coveted assignments. He is an expert in multi pronged strategy and policy formulation, budgeting, and leading cross functional teams. He's a prolific writer and consummate platform speaker. So we are delighted to have you with us. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
So you may start with the discussion now.
Okay. At the outset, let me thank the organizers, my co-panelists, and the friends to whom I shall be making an attempt to reach out on a very, very important subject related to China, wherein it has debt trapped Sri Lanka, and you all would be seeing the profile of Sri Lanka in each and every media channel for last few days, wherein the common people have entered the presidential palace, they have entered the prime minister's residence, they have taken over the parliament, they have taken over the national broadcaster and number of other government organizations. In the ensuing violence, what has happened? The ex prime minister, Mr. Mahinda Rajapakse, has resigned. One member of parliament has been killed. The current president flew from Colombo to Malé initially, and now he has moved to Singapore and resigned. The situation is precarious, and I will not mind it saying that there is not only a warlike situation, but war is on now. How war? Little bit more on this. Now, if you see the current ongoing conflict or war between Russia and Ukraine, and do the critical analysis, you will realize that there were in a minor two demands which was put forward by Russia from Ukraine and NATO countries. One was that Ukraine should not join NATO, and second, NATO should not expand further eastwards. However, none of those things happened, and while Ukraine is fighting on the forefront, but actual fighting is being done by the USA and other European member countries who are part of NATO on a various platforms, militarily, economically, sanction wise, digitally, cyber wise, anything, everything. So that war which is happening there, equally potent or a more disastrous war is happening in Sri Lanka. And what is happening in Sri Lanka? It is because of the greed of Sri Lanka to further its interests in Indian Ocean region and try to garner its energy security route, which gets checkmated at Malacca Strait because of its width being very limited in that point of time, and also it wants to checkmate India so that it never comes anywhere closer to China. Now, coming to the this economic war or economic crisis which has happened, there are three prominent factors who have been contributing towards the current crisis. Because this current crisis has not happened overnight, it has been building up for more than a decade. So, those three factors are three P's. Those P's are: first P is the politicians, second P is the public, and third P is the public, the People's Republic of China, or PRC. Now, why politicians? More than last 10 years, irrespective of the party which has been, in power, all politicians have not displayed adequate economic sense. They have gone in for popularity. They have invested the borrowed money in repaying the debts or giving the tax concession to the people rather than building the capital and capacities. So each government and political establishment is accountable to the current day crisis. Of course, the more blame goes to the Rajpaksa clan, because directly indirectly they have been in power for more than 50 years in Sri Lanka's governance. Now coming to the public, now the public who is now trying to respond, trying to change the government, trying to get the resignation of the president, the same very public, one, it was being given freebies and subsidies by the government. It did not come on the roads to see as to from where that money is coming, how the revenue deficit is increasing. It is the same population which enjoyed the best tax system in the world, not only in Sri Lanka, neighboring countries, and almost in the entire world, the lowest tax regime. Even that time when the governance kitty was going down, the public did not respond, did not show at least some kind of resistance, some kind of thought process that see friends, we have to take care of our finances, otherwise finally this kind of situation was going to happen. And third and main culprit is the third P, that is People's Republic of China. Now China had a concern which can be classified as a legitimate also, because it's more than 70% of energy moves through the Indian Ocean region, and anything which is moving through the Indian Ocean region can be affected by India and other friendly countries in case of any conflict or near conflict scenario, because besides moving in the Indian Ocean region, finally once it goes ahead towards eastwards, it has to pass through the Malacca Strait, where the width of that channel becomes very narrow, and the entire movement can be negated there. So it wanted its footprints, the naval base, in an area from where it can safeguard its energy interest. As against going in a manner which is transparent, it played a game with Sri Lanka, and it is very sad that the Sri Lankan people could not see into that game at all. There's a famous saying by Chanakya and Kautilya Shas, which says that whenever any person or an organization or a country gives you extra leeway or becomes extra harsh to you, you should be cautious, because this is not part of the natural behavior. So, China, which was nowhere in the financial support to Sri Lanka and giving its foreign aid for considerable amount of time, suddenly last 10 15 years it had become very active, and it is currently owning the second largest foreign debt, more than 10%, as far as Sri Lanka is concerned. At this point of time, it also not only created the conditions, but it exploited the weaknesses and challenges faced by Sri Lanka. In 2017, when Sri Lanka was on the verge of default on payment of money to USA, so it thereafter entered into the agreement, took Hambantota port a 99 years lease, and is attempting to make a naval base. If you see critically the location of this naval base, it is in the southern portion of Sri Lanka, and it is very effective actually to protect its vulnerabilities for its shipping and cargo movement which is going through Indian Ocean region. And if somebody comes whether from India or any other country in the world, because of the right of free navigation to checkmate it towards Malacca Strait, the resources of China located at Hambantota can negate that. Not only that, it also exploited Sri Lanka to get a 43% stake in Colombo City Port Project, which is actually just about 500 kilometers to the closest point as far as India is concerned. So, while one hand it supplements its capacity to preserve its interest in the Indian Ocean region. It also gives an option to checkmate, Indian effort. And it has focused only in the central and southern portion because that portion is helping to take care of its interest in the Indian Ocean region. Secondly, if you see the population pattern in Sri Lanka, central and southern portion is predominantly Sinhalese and the northern portion is predominantly Tamils. Tamils are always, seen as, pro-Indians because of their linkages with, Tamil Nadu. Though Sinhalese also, if you go to the history and genesis of the population growth, even they have a close connect with the Indian southern states. But now the perception and the behavior wise, it is Tamils which are being seen pro-Indian, whereas Sinhalese are seen as against, India. Even you would have noticed in the current crisis where actually the Indian government has been very, very supportive in terms of, giving the logistic support, fuel, energy, medical supplies, and billions of dollars in the line of credit. Still, in the current agitations, a number of anti-India slogans were given by, Sri Lankan, because Chinese have, exploited the mind of the Sri Lankan to a reasonable extent, a strategy which they followed deliberately. And they finally came to a situation where Sri Lanka was not able to pay the debt. They requested China to restructure the debt. They also requested China to create the terms and conditions in a manner that IMF loan conditions are complied and they are able to get the money from IMF. But none of these things were supported by China. And even when the current crisis has emerged, it is sitting tight, not making any statements either from its external affairs department or from its embassy in Colombo, and letting it flourish and worsen. In a way, it is having lost its advantage and its credit in the mind of Sri Lankan population, even if it is momentarily. It is now waiting for India to take a negative move so that it can then relatively emerge stronger and take back its preeminent position after the financial situation is normalized. And therefore a critical analysis suggests that a deliberate plan was made by China to intrude into the financial system of Sri Lanka. A lot of loans were provided. The loans were provided against a particular aim. Any country or international organization, whenever it provides the loan, it is intended to meet certain purpose which is stated in the terms and conditions of the loans. But as against that happening, and any capital and capacity creation being done in Sri Lanka, it allowed its own money to get spent on the servicing of its own debt and also being wasted on the revenue related expenditures, and no capital creation took place. It was a deliberate act, and whenever there were situations in Sri Lanka, it exploited to get its major items on lease. In fact, there are social media reports to suggest that they have spent large amount of funds to bring the current Rajpaksa clan to the governments, and in their elections, a lot of money has flown, which they have done probably through the uh, certain companies. Though I don't have any verifiable fact, and it is only stated based on the what has come in the open domain. Maybe right, may not be right, maybe partially right. That is matter of detail. I'm sure the people who are there to take the decisions or who are affected, they would be knowing more on this particular issue. And another thing what China has done, which it is doing to number of other countries, that as against helping a country really to grow, it initially gives the posturing as if it is going to help, giving a lot of money, but then it creates conditions to debt trap. It thereafter tries to grab the strategic assets of that country, makes its military deployment or the posts, and subsequently is only is looking at its own interest and forgets the country where that particular country is doing. And besides the concentrating of the government and the people, it was it always concentrates on the population and the people, correction, not the population, on the people, the individuals whether by pumping money, by persuading, or multiple efforts it makes, and then it brings them on board to further its interest, so that through them thereafter everything else is done. So these are some of the aspects. Since there are more informed speakers, co-panelists who will be joining after me, so I will close my deliberation by making the statement that China has debt trapped Sri Lanka to the current level of economic condition. It is a open war by all standards, because war does not mean hand to hand fight or the round being fired. Till the time you are able to devastate a country, the aim of war is achieved. So what is that is exactly being done by China to Sri Lanka. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Your views were really insightful, and I would like to mention that Q&A session would be followed on later. So if anyone has any questions, they can ask in the chat box. Um, so we'll continue further. So next we have is a Major Amit Bansal, sir. He is a defense strategist who has keen interest in international affairs, geopolitics, global strategy, and counter-terrorism. He is currently serving as the CEO of SL Group, and he has served in the army with the elite forces, and he has a rich experience in to operate in Jammu and Kashmir, Manipur, Nagaland, Assam, and other conflict zones. And he has been a keen writer and has published more than 1,000 articles on various issues pertaining to counterterrorism, geostrategy, technology, and international affairs. So I welcome you, sir. You can start with your discussion.
Thank you, Shalini. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, yes, sir. You are
Yeah,
audible.
thank you. So, as Ashok sir has really brought out about the strategic aspect of Sri Lanka and how India and China are literally in a tussle on this island country. Although the country is going through a literal civil war, and one of the reasons why it has gone into a civil war is the Chinese debt trap. So, let me go into the details of this debt trap now. When we talk about China and India and their influence in Sri Lanka, there's a difference of opinion. There's a difference of intention. So if you see today, while India is offering a 2.5 billion line of credit, China is asking for what? Asking for a free trade agreement and also talking about loans. Loans and loans and loans at an extended interest rate. So it is not that China wants to help Sri Lanka. It is a fight for supremacy versus security. When you talk about China, China is looking for expanding its footprints in Indian Ocean, wants to have a strong hold in Sri Lanka so that it can take care of its string of pearls and all, which Ashok sir has really brought out. I'm not deliberating on that. It wants to get a political and strategic leverage against India by having its presence in Sri Lanka. And that's why it has been working on it for last almost a decade, where so many of projects have been sanctioned and they ultimately form part of this debt trap. Now, when we are talking about intention, one of the major point what I would like to brought out is when all the lenders, all the countries who have lended money to Sri Lanka, they have formed a London club so that they can jointly discuss about having a kind of a joint committee and giving kind of some kind of relief to Sri Lanka. China literally moved out of it. It said, no, we don't want to be part of the London Club. I want to be independent so that it can independently pressurize Sri Lanka for this. Chinese ambassador, now Sri Lanka started when recently Prime Minister and now acting President Ranil Wickremesinghe started talking to International Monetary Fund for a bailout. Who criticized it? It was Chinese ambassador to Colombo, Key Zhenhang, who openly criticized that Sri Lanka should not go to IMF. They should approach China. They should approach Chinese financial institutions for more loan. So what is it that what the intention is? Debt trap. The same Key Zhenhang has also criticized when Ranil Wickremesinghe started approaching European countries as well as United Nations for some kind of grants. So if we analyze the detail of this debt to Sri Lanka, though the values are differing from different organization to organization, different think tank to different think tank, I assume that about 56 billion of total debt which Sri Lanka has got, it owes 11 billion to China only for BRI, Belt and Road Initiative projects, which is close to 20% of the total debt. It is not 10% or 15%. I strongly feel that it is 20% because we have a lot of figures have been unaccounted for, and not even a single loan has been given from Chinese government. 100% of this $11 billion loan has been given from Chinese banks, Chinese financial institutions. And how the interest rate has been calculated? They calculated on the basis of Shanghai Interbank Operative Rate plus 3%, plus 3.5%, plus 4%, which is today coming out to be 5.6, 5.7, or even 6.5% of the interest rate. That is the prime reason of Sri Lanka going into the debt. Although there is a think tank of Sri Lanka, Verite, which has said that the figure is about 8.2 billion of Chinese debt, but I don't believe on this because these figures keep on varying, and if we calculate and we add all the numbers of various projects, the figure is somewhere coming out to be $11 billion. Now, in addition to this $11 billion, there is something else to it. China has exported good about $5.2 billion goods, which include various things have come from China because Sri Lanka has been a heavily import dependent country to Sri Lanka, and these 5.2 billion has been given to various institutions, various business houses, not to the government. So when we are talking about $11 billion is purely the government debt, but this $5 billion export which has happened in last 1 or 2 years, a big portion of it has also been unpaid. And it will be paid by what? Foreign currency, which is not there in Sri Lanka. Even if a private banker is there, even if a private institution is there, even if a private business house is there, they have to pay the debt. They will have to get the foreign currency, which is not there in Sri Lanka. Third thing is that there is a bilateral agreement which Sri Lanka has signed with China, as per which the payment has to be in a foreign currency, preferably Chinese renminbi. Now, again, in this case, China is in a positive mode. China is getting all the benefits because uh, it is his currency. Now, I will talk about the rollover thing because when Ranil Vikram Singhe took over about a month back, he asked China and its financial institutions to roll over the debt. While the lenders, London Club has accepted the request and they've already started working on a mechanism to roll over the debt. Chinese institutions have blatantly refused to roll over the debt. And they said that if they do it for Sri Lanka, they might have to do it for other countries, so they cannot do it for Sri Lanka. Shamelessly. Not only that, they said if you want help, we can offer you another $1 billion, but again the rate will be 4% plus Shanghai Interbank Operative Rate, which is coming out to be 6% plus. This is not my statement, this is a statement of Ranil Vikram Singhe who made it in the last week of May. So as I already mentioned about London, so intention is not there. Intention is to occupy China forcefully. Intention is to put Sri Lanka, I correct myself, intention of China is to forcefully put Sri Lanka into its debt trap and extract a strategic oblique political levy out of it. I'll talk about the projects which we all know, but I'll just refresh your memories on that. Hambantota Port, $1.4 billion cost was taken. It was done by Chinese company, and ultimately, when Sri Lankan government was unable to pay it, the port has been given on 99 years lease to China. Hambantota Airport, again, $200 million cost, and no aircraft has landed on this airport since 2018 because it is in the jungle. It doesn't connect to the cities. Only benefit of Hambantota is that it is the hometown of Rajpaksa family. Another project they've constructed is Neelam Kuvarna Tower, which is in Colombo. It is supposed to be the tallest building in Southeast Asia at a cost of $100 million. Again, China has taken over this building. It has got commercial spaces, it's got mall, it's got business houses. Entire thing is now taken over by China. They are running it. One more example I would like to take of Colombo Port City. In 2014, Now, how? This is the mechanism how China puts its debt trap. Colombo Port City was launched in 2014, but and was to be completed by 2019 in 5 years. Now, China kept on delaying it intentionally. Sometimes their engineers never arrived at work. Sometimes work is stopped for months, and as a result, there was a time when Sri Lanka was losing almost 3.8 lakh or 4 lakh dollars per day as a loss to this project. Now, from where does Sri Lanka get this money? Because the investor is China. So ultimately, Chinese stake in this project was increasing day by delaying the project because they are escalating the cost. And what they were doing, they were taking more and more land in Colombo Port City as a share of China in lieu of this delay money. So you understand this part. You are intentionally delaying the project, and when the project is already delayed, your cost is escalated, and when you have to get compensated for that cost, so instead of taking a kind of brunt, you are charging the country only and taking more and more land in your custody. So, as per earlier project, the total land for this Colombo port city is supposed to be 269 acres, and out of that, China was supposed to be given only 88 acres as per the 2014 agreement. What has happened today in 2022? China is holding almost 150 hectare, which is nearly 60% of the total land of Colombo Port City, with an agreement that it is likely to take over the entire 269 acre in near future. So from 88 acres, which is coming out to be roughly 40% or maybe 38% of the total project. Now China is taking over 100% of the project towards the fulfillment of its debt. So that's what is debt trap is. That's how the Sri Lanka has gone into the debt trap. So in a general, before I conclude my remarks, I would like to tell you how China does its debt trap, how China puts its debt trap around the country. The first step, it identifies the countries which are strategically located. The first thing is they have to be strategically located. They should have weak economy. They should have corrupt politicians, and the country should be in need of money. So once the country is identified, it moves in its best emissaries over there. It moves in its best ambassadors over there. They'll go, they strike a deal with the politicians, and with their approval, with giving them kickbacks, start the infrastructure projects in countries on loan. Now it is a win-win situation in the country. What happens? China gets to work in that country. It is putting its own stronghold. Politicians can show a candy to their countrymen. Yes, I bought in China. I bought in Chinese investment. I am constructing so much of projects. Now these projects are constructed by the funding of China, which are heavily escalated. If a project has to be constructed in $100 million, Chinese will take a cost as $400 million, $500 million, even $800 million. 4 times, 6 times, 8 times the cost they take it. And their only condition is that a Chinese company will be constructing it. Now, when a Chinese company comes in, you cannot back check the cost. You have to rely on whatever estimate is given. Now, project gets delayed, and Chinese keep on increasing their stake. And as a result, ultimately, when the project is complete or something is done, country is not able to pay back. And when country is not able to pay back, they start pressurizing the country to hand over its assets. And also, because since they are already in touch with the corrupt politicians, they will stop it from going to IMF or maybe the Western world or maybe the neutral organizations. That's what has happened with Sri Lanka also. In last 4 years, since 2018, when Rajpaksa family started publishing its economic outlook, they never went to IMF. They never went to ADB. All the old loans were continued, and they continue to take more loans from China. We have a lot of examples. Pakistan, which was unable to pay its debts for CPAC, it had to give 2 islands near Karachi coast, including, other than that, they have to give Gwadar Special Economic Zone and Jivani, which is now being developed as a military base for China. They also had given part of Gilgit Baltistan to China. Laos, where entire their electricity grid has been given to China. There are so many examples in the ASEAN countries where assets have been taken over. Djibouti is already there. which holds Chinese base. Not only that, few countries realize that they are going into the debt trap. Malaysia realized it, so they scrapped a railway project which was being built at overpriced cost of China. Thailand also restructured one of the railway project. Bangladesh also pulled out from few of the low cost projects. So ultimately, people who have gone deep into the trap, China ensures that these countries are never able to move out of this trap. And that's what it wants in case of Sri Lanka also. It doesn't want Sri Lanka to take any help from India. It doesn't want Sri Lanka to take help from any other country. It is trying to put fuel to the fire in Sri Lanka so that things go worst. And as a result, people whom China wants, people who are favorable to China, politicians who are favorable to China come into power, and China is able to establish its stronghold over the country. So that's what I had to say, and I think my time is up. So I'll conclude my remarks with that. And later on, I think somebody is asking a question, so we'll take on the question at the last. Shalini, for you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amit sir. You gave a very simplified explanation of this very vicious and complex, Chinese debt trap diplomacy. Thanks a lot. Next we have is Dr. J. Jagannathan sir. He is an assistant professor of National Security Studies in Central University of Jammu and Kashmir. He's also an alumni of JNU, and his research interests are international relations and India's foreign and South Asia, regional security and geopolitics, nuclear security and stability in South Asia, and with focus on Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. So, welcome, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Abhishek, for this opportunity to share my thoughts on this topic. And really, I think whatever I wanted to, I prepared to say it's already been said. But what I'm going to do is in my brief sort of presentation and comments, I'm going to focus on three questions. These questions are it's broader. It's in the common in everyone's mind when it comes to what's happening in Sri Lanka. The first question is that when Rajapaksa was ousted and Ranil Wickremesinghe was made the prime minister in the month of May this year, there was a hope that sooner or later the country will be back on track. And the international community is also sort of welcoming that change, which was very much in need as the country was going through a tough time. So now the question comes that what is the reason that where the country is now today? What happened in the last 3 4 months? That development is very crucial to understand why there is a sudden sort of uprise, the, the mass uprise, and sort of the president has to leave and resign. There are two important developments. It's a chronologically since I've been following this matter for quite long, and particularly very closely for last couple of months since this year. The first and foremost development is that when Ranil he was made a PM, and the Basil Rajapaksa was out, the finance minister. He had the hope that he would be able to restore or restructure his debt and better manage the debt that the Sri Lanka has accumulated over the period with the help of IMF and with the help of one of the most reliable neighbor, India, and other parts like the Japan or European countries. So what happened is that on the month of June 23rd, I guess, in the April, what happened is that the Sri Lankan government, whatever the borrowings from external players like India has also promised $4 million, they start off trying to repay the principal and interest of the sovereign bonds, which from their two banks, the principal banks. One is I think, Colombo Bank and the People's Bank. The Chinese has also has taken a huge sovereign bonds from the US, particularly the Hamilton Reserve, which holds the veterans bond, the money, and gives the bonds to the Sri Lankan government has bought it. So this has got into the knowledge of the Hamilton Reserve, So they have sued the Sri Lankan government for being by default by declaring that the country is in default to the external source where they have bought the bonds, but at the same time they are paying the principal and interest to the local banks. But the Ranil had a logic, or he has a reason to defend, saying that if you don't repay the interest and principal amounts to the local banks, yeah, and the banks will default, collapse and default, then it will be a complete chaos, and the government would not able to pay the salaries to the even the armed forces, the Sri Lankan armed forces. But the Hamilton reserves have filed a suit in the New York court, New York, and one of the allegation is that the entire the debt that borrowing has been mismanaged and manipulated by the Rajapaksa family, and they declare it. So, in the 2 days after that, there was a visit by the high-level delegation from the United States Department, and they met the Gotabaya Rajapaksa because this has become an 80% of the funds which are from the veterans pensions and all managed by the Hamilton reserves and which were given as a loan to the Sri Lankan government. So it had its own if it won't have the stakeholders will be affected, and it will be a huge impact in the United States if the veterans got to know that this is what happening. So for the safer side, the bank has filed a suit, and that had actually deteriorated the situation. And Ranil has realized that everything has gone out of his hand. So finally, what happened? That IMF team has visited again on 27th June, and the problem that Gotabaya government or Rajapaksa government. This is where I'm going to bring this Chinese hand or Chinese brain into this thing. So the Rajapaksa government, they knew that the economy is in a shambles, and they could have approached IMF, but they have taken I don't know, maybe the family personal stand or maybe at the instructions by Chinese or any of their partners, perhaps Chinese, they decided not to approach IMF. That was the decision. So finally, when they realized that it was a mistake, when Ranil approached IMF, and given the suit filed in the Hamilton court in New York, the IMF uh, sort of could not able to restructure when the suit is already filed. And that's why in July 5th or 7th, the Ranil has declared in the parliament that we have gone bankrupt. So that has having a cascading effect on that. And that's entirely it. So I'm coming back to this debt diplomacy, where the Chinese have had. Uh, Already been discussed, and I have shared a PPT. Maybe I can share now. Can you see my presentation? Yeah. Can you see my presentation? Hello.
Yes, yes, it is being seen.
So already the statistics has been already been mentioned by the previous speakers. So I'm just going to flag few of the things that one the trend, the pattern suggests ever since the Chinese BRI has started in 2013, there have been a massive investments in Sri Lanka. These are all strategic investments under the Belt and Road initiatives as well as the bilateral investments. And there is no transparency and there is no accountability that how where these funds are being spent, how they are spent, and there is no public transparency or accountability of these funds since the entire family is managing or controlling the economy and having the administration or the governance. So that has resulted, even the Chinese were clueless that the Sri Lanka would slip into such a thing. And if you look at the Chinese pattern that I'm going to, wherever under the BRI, wherever they have invested, South Africa or even in Sri Lanka or even in Pakistan in CPEC, they choose this authoritarian regime. There's a total a regime which has a total control and does not have any sort of transparency and accountability. I don't know why they prefer those regimes and they invest. So this has been the pattern that the Chinese have been doing it. And the overall debt, if you look at the debt, this latest figure, the Chinese debts are very specific. It's not the general specific. So one can conclude that the China is not the reason for what is happening in Sri Lankan economic crisis, or the major chunk of debt is due to the Chinese diplomacy or debt diplomacy. It has its own 10%. But what is important to understand and understand and observe is that the Chinese helped the Rajapaksa family to sustain their authoritarian model of governance or structure so that there won't be any public transparency and accountability. And even the Chinese investments, the Chinese labors were being part of it. So there's a total disconnect between the local markets and the local people benefiting out of the Chinese investment, as it is the case in the other projects which have been there in other like in Pakistan, CPEC or CPEC or in Africa, other countries. So the external market borrowings, the 47% of the market borrowings, and they realize that it is going beyond their and the further the pandemic and all worsened the situation. The Gotabaya had no option, and that's the time that, as the earlier speaker mentioned, that they were negotiating the free trade agreement. Instead of restructuring, the Chinese trying to restructuring their debt, the Chinese are very keen to enter into penetrate into the markets, domestic markets, particularly retail markets. That would perpetually, I mean, that will permanently make Sri Lanka totally dependent on the Chinese. So it could have been like a sort of a market, a colonialization or debt colonialism, or you can coin it. The second aspect is the strategic entanglement or the strategic tag attached to the Chinese BRI initiative, and that has affected the Sri Lankan government's trust towards the Western countries, and also most importantly, its neighbor, the immediate neighbor in India. So you can see the India-Sri Lanka relations if you observe last since 2014. It was sort of a cordial during Sirisena was the president, and he in fact ordered the inquiry into all these Chinese investment into Sri Lanka. But then finally, the ball turned, turned again towards the Paksha family. So since then, the relationship was like the Paksha family realized the post LTT that they could be able to balance or India or even blackmail India using China. And meanwhile, they have also it's sort of a perception in the West has been built that the Sri Lankan is actually playing with the Chinese hand. So and again, I attribute this to the Chinese hand because the China is also not clear about the investments, whether it has although it has a strategic like being it Hambantota or Colombo port. But more than Colombo port, Hambantota port, I would argue that this Colombo port city project had further worsened Sri Lanka's relationship with Western countries, the great powers, and also the regional power, India. Because it is seen as a direct threat to India's sphere of influence. There's no doubt about that, and you may come out with any sort of logics to show. And Sri Lanka is not able to handle such a massive projects, and they were expecting a huge investments, particularly Western investments. How can the Chinese project? How can the Western companies or the capitalists or the investors would invest in a Chinese project which is built in a third country? So that is a big question that that has been there. So the strategic thing that they were not able to anticipate that they have somewhat some sort of a strategic entanglement into this entire. They caught in the game of the Chinese and they fall into the Chinese hand. So this particular port is a massive project, and they expected and they anticipated that would bring investments so that they can repay the debt and also things and reach and pay back the bonds whatever they bought from the United States. And these bonds are not bought even during the war. They have borrowed huge money from the market, and the market has also given because even the government, the post LTT victory and the stability that Paksha's family had shown that they have consolidated the political power in this island country. So finally, now what is the way out? I mean, these are the debt diplomacy that how it works, and they finally enter into that trap. Now, what is the? These are the figures that the Chinese have invested. If you look at all these cases are facing the same problem. But only thing is the time that when it is going to pop up, and we'll get to know that what went wrong and this. Then we'll have a maybe 1 or 2 years. We'll have a detailed case about how this entire BRI project, which was invested in these underdeveloped poor countries, and they have been trapped into these Chinese ports. So there, perhaps that's a strategic interpretation. So there is no doubt that Chinese investments and also the the way in the China is handling the crisis when the Sri Lanka is going through a crisis, the way in which they are responding to this crisis, that also shows that they have totally sort of uh, took their hands off from the Sri Lankan crisis. They were only expecting the returns or the from whatever they invested in the thing invested in Sri Lanka. So that is a big challenge that whoever takes part in Sri Lanka, and they are going to face that. They have to pay the 47% of the external debt from they've got it from the market, and also the other the returns that they have to pay to the Chinese. Already they have been demanding. So now, what is the way out, and what is going to happen in Sri Lanka? In my view, I think the current political, the domestic, given the mood of the people and the mass, I think that the people of Sri Lanka, including the Tamils or other section of people, I don't think so they lost trust. I don't think so they have trust on any political parties or political leaders. So they don't have any trust. They lost the trust that someone would come on bail out them. Many leaders will do the magic, and that's because precisely the Ranil Wickremesinghe's statement in the parliament in the meeting that when he said the Sri Lanka, our country is bankrupt, and he said it would take 3 to 4 years to even at least come back to -1 GDP growth. So everybody lost hope. And being a leader, Ranil Wickremesinghe did the biggest blunder of going to public on record and saying such a statement, and that leads to an anarchical situation. So I anticipate that maybe the long-term situation, because now no countries will, if you start off an anarchy, no country will come on invest, no agent, no organizations will come and bail out. Even India will be watching the India will be reluctant to even give more external aids, any loans to the because to the Sri Lanka. So it is like a complete chaos there. So the only option I think that scenario is going to emerge is I think the army is going to take over the law and order situation. That I think I think it is going to happen. I'm not suggesting that there's going to be a military coup, but someone will take the control of this entire law and order situation and pave the way for the political process. But again, the process is that will again they go for an election, spend more money, and the people will go and vote for the leaders. And when they don't have a money, so and there is a severe leadership crisis happening in Sri Lanka. There is a complete sort of situation. So we have to wait and watch what's going to happen in, after 2 or 3 months. The Chinese also, according to my analysis, reading from the Chinese various statements, the Chinese are also very much concerned, and they are also severely affected by the these cases. I think I remember in way back in 2018 when there was a conference on Belt and Road Initiative. Most of the Chinese professors who have attended privately they have expressed the disappointment, and they saying that they are not they're hopeful that this would this would be a successful project, particularly in the Sri Lanka and Pakistan CPEC. I think that is going to come true, and the Chinese officials are the mind, the brain behind this project. It's a big challenge for them to manage how are they going to manage this crisis. So China will be severely affected, and they are also concerned about what's happening in Sri Lanka. In a way, I think given the Hambantota lease and all, it is also in tomorrow if some X, Y, Z come, to come back to power, and they may say we will cancel whatever the previous agreements like 99 lease agreements and whatever the investments. So it will be a big trouble for China. So the only way out is the Sri Lanka, who the new regime has to depend on the immediate neighbor India and the Western countries, particularly the US and the Europe. So I'll stop here and I look forward to have more questions and comments.
Thank you so much, Jagannathan sir, for your insights. Now the floor is open for questions. If anyone has them, we do have a few questions from our viewers on YouTube. If anyone has a question, otherwise I'll start asking from there. Okay, we'll just okay. I'll just start asking. Um, Ashok, the first question is from you. So given that we have a very turbulent South Asia right now, so what should be the long-term strategy for India to deal with all this, and especially given that this debt trap is in full swing in our neighboring countries of India. So what should be the strategy for India to deal with all this?
Actually, it is a big dilemma as far as India is concerned with respect to Sri Lanka. The answer to this question is not easy, but I shall try to give some indicators towards that. Now, if you see the ethnic composition of Sri Lanka, it is predominantly Sinhalese population and Tamil population. In a real population analysis, both these segments were from the southern states of India. However, since the Tamils got little later and the Tamil Nadu has got Tamil population, so that linkage is more apparent. And somewhere Sinhalese are not, known and perceived to be part of the ex-Indian settlements, which is factually wrong. Now, currently it is not a military situation. If you see what happened in 1987 when India intervened on the invitation of Sri Lanka government at that point of time in form of Indian peacekeeping force to disarm the LTTE, but all the calculations went awry, and finally, as against disarming the LTTE and bringing peace to the allied nation, that resulted in a huge fights. A lot of casualties were suffered by the IPKF, and finally we came out from there in 1990. But the whole experience was not good. So, firstly, at this point of time, since the problem is not anything close to the military related issue, so military intervention and option from India is ruled out. In fact, you'll be surprised to know that since the independence in Sri Lanka, even the Sri Lankan military has never ventured actually to move into the governance, and they have let the civil government run the sea. Even as of now, they have got no inclination, no interest whatsoever to enter into the domain of government. So the military option is out. What could be done? I think there are three options which India must focus on. Option one, since the crisis is economical, India should use its own leverage with the international institutions, with USA, European countries, and elsewhere. Firstly, to get the IMF bailout package for Sri Lanka. In addition to the IMF bailout, it should also use its leverage with BRICS, Asian Development Bank, and other lender institutions in the international environment to give more money to Sri Lanka in an organized manner where the bulk money does not go into the debt servicing and the freebies, but it builds and takes care of the real economic challenges of Sri Lanka. I may be, appearing alarmist in the second suggestion. I think there is a case of having three friendship divisions. Actual division in a military term, so at times it gets confused that I am recommending a military option, but it is not that. The friendship division is basically constituted where you have some kind of security forces which are meant to provide security to the element of the this friendship division. You have a grain and a fuel component, you have the logistic component, and whole kind of this paraphernalia of manpower, expertise, and resources. Where one such division can be put in the northern portion, one in the center, and one in the southern. As far as apprehension with related to military component is concerned, as against the armed forces, even the paramilitary forces can constitute, so that once this manpower and resource goes into the Sri Lanka and puts things in some kind of sense in the people, because that cooperation of the people is very very important. Some kind of security will be needed. And the last, which may be appearing alarmist, I don't know if there is any scope in today's time or not. But if you really see, both India and Sri Lanka, erstwhile Ceylon, were part of the British colonies. And India being the largest recipient of the British's occupation, is a rightful claimant of anything which was part of British India at any point of time, including Sri Lanka. It will not be out of text, and that the some kind of unification is worked between Sri Lanka and India, because the offering of assistance, these problems recreating the Chinese intervention and interest will continue to happen time and again. if there are people from both the countries, can think through, sit together, and some kind, it could not be a merging of Sri Lanka and India or vice versa. It could be a kind of loose confederation on the lines of European Union or somewhere else, where we can address the concern of Sri Lanka in a much better manner. I must caution you that Sri Lanka's doing well is as important to India as is to Sri Lanka, and therefore India has to take a deliberate call as to how it can bring Sri Lanka out of the current crisis without being seen as interventionist. That is an important watershed which it has to navigate. How it is done, I am sure our people from Ministry of External Affairs will be already doing this job. Thank you.
Okay. So Jagannathan sir, next question is, which countries? It's a question from Neeraj Verma from our YouTube viewership. Which countries do you see as firmly placed under this Chinese umbrella, and which need not be trusted or should not be trusted and depended upon?
I mean, which countries where the Chinese have invested in?
They are placed under Chinese umbrella, like they are friends of China, or they cannot be trusted upon by India.
See, in international politics, there is no permanent friend, no permanent foe. So you cannot say that okay, there is someone is. It's a classical, realistic argument way of looking at international relations. So you never know. We do have a strong economic relationship with China. We cannot totally ignore China. It's not like a black and white scenario or zero sum game. So I don't think so that India should not rely on. I know what he's trying to refer to, but I wanted. One thing I would like to say that see, we cannot ignore China's rise or China's growing stature in the international politics, and they have money and they are having the mega projects. So I cannot come upon this thing that which country we should not rely on this. So it's a game when we have to play with that accordingly without sort of getting into a sort of military confrontation. It's a competition.
Yes, indeed. Okay. Next, Amit sir, we have another question from Pankaj. He asked, what is the future for smaller countries like Nepal or Bhutan? Like, do they have a sovereign future, or are they gonna be trapped?
See, the smaller countries will always have a larger chance to get trapped by China because they are having a weaker economy, and in case a smaller country has got a political turmoil like Sri Lanka or like Nepal, there are very high chances that it may go into the Chinese debt trap. So that the country has to see itself. What are they buying? See, because as I told you, the mechanism of the entire Chinese debt trap, the first key factor is the corrupt politicians who can sanction their over expensive projects, who can sanction their not projects which are actually not required. So these kind of things are to be looked into, and the country has to take care of it. Internationally, you can't do anything because it is a bilateral issue when China is investing in a country. You can't do anything, but we have to keep a vigil on it, and it's the leadership of the country itself has to take a call on this.
Okay, Amit sir, there is another question for you. So it's a question from Srijan. He asked that we hear a lot about decoupling from China. So do you see that happening?
See, decoupling is starting now. A lot of efforts are going on. We are also working towards Make in India campaign. We are also working towards Atmanirbhar Bharat. But that started recently. We have been dependent on China on various issues, various aspects, because China has set up its manufacturing setup, and they came in 1979 with a vision that they have to become the manufacturing hub of the world. That's why everywhere in the world, wherever you go, you find Chinese things. So our dependence is not going to go down in a day or two. It will take several years. The process has started now. It'll take time. It'll take maybe a decade or so. But yes, slowly and slowly we'll be, see. Earlier, few things we were not manufacturing. We were importing it from China. Today, we are doing it. Earlier, the toys and all, everything used to come from China. Now we are manufacturing it. Earlier, all these firecrackers or maybe the all sort of things used to come from China. Now we are manufacturing it. So slowly and slowly, we are now getting self-sufficient, but it'll take time.
Oh, thank you, sir. Jagannathan, sir, there's a last question for you. So it's asked by Priya. She asks that Chinese are driven by, vendetta against many countries. So as the world becomes more aware of that and vocal about this Chinese threat, can there be a full-blown war in the Indo-Pacific?
It cannot be ruled out. I can say the full blown war cannot be ruled out
Okay.
because this is the Chinese internal, particularly the CCP thinking and the Xi Jinping's team thinks this is a golden opportunity for China in the past centuries. So they want to seize it. So I think they may go for a full blown war. It cannot be ruled out.
Okay. Okay, that is it for the question answer session because majorly we have repeated questions. So we'll try to wind up the session now. So for vote of thanks, we have Mr. Abhishek Ranjan. He is currently working as a consultant with our RLA, and he's also a research scholar at Center for East Asian Studies in SIS JNU. And his research focus is South Korea's alignment strategies with China. And welcome, Abhishek sir.
Thank you, Salim, for inviting me for vote of thanks. I, Abhishek Ranjan, on behalf of Red Lantern Analytica, would like to thank all the participants, along with our speakers, Major General Ashok Kumar, Major Amit Bansal, and Dr. Jagannathan. I thank all the speakers for taking out time from their busy schedule and enlightening us about China's depth of diplomacy and Sri Lanka's economic crisis. The issue have been widely covered by all the speakers. However, I would only like to add that within a year, world has witnessed Afghanistan crisis, Ukraine crisis, and now Sri Lankan crisis. All this together has reasserted the fact that so-called superpowers have failed to maintain the stability and stability in the region, stability in the world, and has provided India an opportunity to emerge as a responsible superpower. And this can only be achieved if we responsibly try to understand the world affairs. Red Lantern Analytica is determined to do the same, and we wish that all the eminent speakers will continue to work with us even in future. Once again, I thank you all. Thank you, sir, for taking out your time and joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhishek sir. I thank everyone once again for to be a part of this webinar. It was really nice listening to everyone's views. Thank you all.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you very much.
Uh, Thank you very much. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Abhishek, sir.